He was a lion in battle. He was a servant of God. He was the father of his nation. He guided his people into the modern world. His name was Abdulaziz. In 1901, 60 armed men set out in secret across the desert. They were led by Abdulaziz bin Abdul Rahman al Saud. His aim was to capture Riyadh and unify the country. It was, he felt, his destiny. He was 26 years old.
One night, I had a strange dream. I saw myself on horseback on a lonely steppe at night. And also there was old Muhammad ibn Rashid. I raced after him, got hold of a corner of his cloak, then his arm, and I blew out his lantern. When I awoke, I knew with certainty that I was destined to take power back with the help of Allah.
Ten years before, Abdulaziz and his family had left Riyadh and gone into exile. Now his target was the Rashidi governor Ajlan's headquarters, the Mazmak fort in the middle of Riyadh. Ajlan slept there each night for protection. Leaving most of his followers outside, Abdulaziz crept into the town with just a few companions. This was his second attempt to take the fort. 6 months before, he had besieged it for 4 months.
افتح الباب.
Concealed in the house opposite, Abdulaziz and his men waited for sunrise, when Ajlan would leave the fort to go home. At last, Ajlan's horses were brought out. Abdulaziz attacked Ajlan, who fled into the fort, and bin Jilwi killed him inside. With just 40 men, Abdulaziz had defeated twice that number, captured the fort, and regained Riyadh. The Al Saud had returned. It was January 1902.
When Abdulaziz fought Ajlan and won, the people of Riyadh accepted him. When his victory was declared at the top of Mazmak, they said, "We have heard and obey." The people of Riyadh were forced to have bin Rashid as their ruler. They didn't want him.
Abdulaziz's victory meant the return of a dynasty which had dominated the heart of Arabia for long years before. More than 200 years ago, the Al Saud held court here in Diriyah, the capital of the first Saudi state. Here they patronized a religious reformer, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. Their reform movement revolutionized Arabia.
Before them, Najd was nothing. People used to say that the Najdis were always fighting, the strong dominating the weak, ever since the creation. Until God sent the Al Saud who preached the slogan of, "There is no God but God." And since then, we've been in God's grace because of them.
The movement was based on an absolute commitment to the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. The Al Saud rulers were called Imam by their people.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
We're not calling for a new creed, and Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab brought nothing new. Our creed is the creed of our Muslim forefathers.
في ذلك الزمن كان هناك في الجزيرة العربية شبه انفلات.
At that time, the people of Arabia were somewhat loose in their Islamic beliefs. There were many blemishes, customs, and traditions that were added to Islam, as you may find in other religions. These additions were done away with in accordance with Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab's teachings, which were, in fact, truly Islamic.
And from this teaching, the state of Diriyah started. And it started and expanded. And one of its main goals was to purify the faith and to unify the land. And the proof for this is that when it unified the Arabian Peninsula, it went out to Iraq, Syria, and Al-Arish to unify the Arabian lands.
But by 1891, the second Saudi state, which had dominated most of Arabia for decades, had dissolved in dispute and civil strife. The Imam Abdul Rahman bin Saud and his family left Riyadh and went into exile. His son Abdulaziz went with him, with the hope he would return. They first took refuge with the Bedouin tribes in the empty quarter. Abdulaziz was just 16 years old. In the desert, Abdulaziz experienced the nomad existence, the struggle for resources, and the traditional culture of the Bedouin, the hospitality, the warlike traditions, the culture of the desert.
In those deserts, he learned how to get hungry, how to be thirsty, and how to feel the bitterness of injustice. They had no protocol or polite manners. They always acted straightforwardly. He learned all these things and treated people accordingly. He had a quick mind, Had he been an adventurer, it would not have worked.
After 7 months in the desert, Abdulaziz and his family moved to Kuwait, awaiting an opportunity to return to Riyadh. Even then, their situation was difficult.
At one time, I was so poor that I couldn't even afford a carpet for my saddle. But the empty sacks which were placed under the sheepskin did as well.
من الباعة إلى الساسة وأكيد أن نتعلم أشياء كثيرة.
From the merchants to the politicians, he must have learned so much. He received visitors coming from his people in Nejd, and he always asked them about the situation in Nejd. All these things taught him a lot. Wherever he went, he learned. He was not an adventurer. He was a man with a vision.
Before long, Abdulaziz experienced and saw in Kuwait at first hand the forces that would shape the future of Arabia, and he learnt about the international politics of the day. To the north, the dominant power was the Ottoman Empire, with its capital in Istanbul. For centuries, the Ottoman sultans had considered themselves caliphs of the faithful Muslim community. As such, they had traditionally played an important role in Arabia. But in the Arabian Gulf, there was another power, that of the British Empire. The British were increasing their influence in the Gulf. This was the situation when Abdulaziz made his attack on Riyadh. Abdulaziz's victory brought his father Abdul Rahman back to Riyadh as Imam. Together they fortified the town to await the inevitable counterattack. It came within months. Determined to restore their position, the Al-Rashid gathered a massive army from the tribes under their control. Leaving his father safe in Riyadh, Abdulaziz took to the south to be ready for them. Eventually, he confronted the army in the palm groves of Dilam. But his army was much smaller. Abdulaziz had mobilized the people of the nearby towns with modern weapons. In an intense encounter, they threw back 2 assaults. Abdulaziz defeated his enemy just as he ran out of ammunition. In the mosques of the little towns of the Riyadh district, the word went out that the Al Saud had returned, and with them the fierce commitment to Sharia law and Islamic values.
واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا. يا أيها المسلمون، إن من فضل الله عز وجل على هذه البلاد أن جمع كلمة أهلها على التوحيد وإقامة شريعتها السمحة، وذلك بفضل الله عز وجل ثم بفضل عبدالعزيز.
يعني في تلك الأيام رأوا في عبدالعزيز.
People in those days saw in Abdulaziz their values and their manners. They saw in Abdulaziz their hopes and wishes and expectations, and that's why they followed him willingly, because they were very religious people too.
Abdulaziz and his father began to reach out to the tribes and emirs who controlled the oases. One by one, they fell in behind him, and in 1903, Abdulaziz felt strong enough to unify the lands, moving northwest into Qasim.